You're watching IKTV, and this is our edition of Unrendered. My guest on this edition is Professor Hazel Simmonds McDonald, and she is the Pro-Vice Chancellor and Open Campus Principal, University of the West Indies. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much for having me.
I take it that you've spent a week in St. Vincent, but you're no stranger to St. Vincent.
No, I've been to St. Vincent a number of times before. My first visit was when I was a ranger in secondary school. I was in secondary school, and we had a trip to St. Vincent, and we had a sort of a weekend camp down in Indian Bay.
Right.
And I enjoyed it tremendously. It's lovely swimming and.
In fact, you're just from the neighboring island of St. Lucia.
St. Lucia, right. So we can look, stay at Viewfort and look across and say hi to you. Probably see us waving sometimes.
See the lights go by. Now, you hold this esteemed position as Pro-Vice Chancellor and Principal of the Open Campus.
Yeah.
We're going to talk substantially about the Open Campus on this program.
Okay.
But I want to spend some time as well talking about you, Professor. I want to look at your educational background, your academic achievements, because I have here quite an impressive CV. It's a 23-page CV, and you've done wonderful things. Tell me, how does one get to be a professor at the University of the West Indies?
Let's see. It's the university has this process for assessing its academics to determine whether they become a professor. I guess there are certain criteria that that will determine whether a committee, which would be the University Appointments Committee, whether the committee will decide your eligibility to go forward for the title of professor. But before that, there are other levels that you go through. So if you have a doctorate, you would most likely start at the level of a lecturer. And there are several steps you go through. Annually, you are assessed by your peers at the campus level through the Campus Appointments Committee. And it depends on whether you actually fulfill the requirements of the criteria. That will determine whether you go forward, whether you advance in the academy.
Right.
So the criteria depend on things like publication, research and publications. You must be doing research in your field, and your publications, which normally would be based on the research that you do, would have to be original research that contribute to the body of knowledge, and it would have to be sufficient. If you're teaching and you're doing research as well, which would be the substantive set of responsibilities or duties you would have as a lecturer, and supervising students doing their Caribbean studies and theses, you would probably be expected to do at least 2 or 3 papers a year in international refereed journals. That is to say, journals that appear in academic journals that are accessible to scholars, in institutions.
So that's a tremendous amount of work, and I suppose to you it comes quite natural, being an academic. And I'm going to refer to your CV here. Your qualifications are mainly in the field of, well, I say English language, but you call it linguistics something.
Well, yes. Started with a degree in English literature, but we did, UE offered, when I did my degree at Mona, you had to do certain courses in linguistics.
Right.
Introductory courses, but things like Old English. So you studied where the modern language came from, Old English, Middle English, a bit of philology.
Did you have to do Latin as a precursor
I did
to all
it
of
in
that?
secondary school.
Yeah.
Yes, up to 3rd form I did Latin. At that time, secondary schools offered Latin did help, so we did that. I did Latin. After I moved on from 3rd form, when I went into 4th form, the school started to offer a choice. It was Latin and something else, so that some students would not have taken Latin. So Latin at secondary school, but at university, English literature with some linguistics. And that gave you the first degree, the bachelor's, in a special English program. I did English honors, the English honors program.
And you did this at UWI?
I did this at UWI at Mona, and I was lucky that there was a University of the West Indies that I could go to. I had come first that year in my A levels.
Right. So
in fact, we were the guinea pigs for the O levels my year. That the first set of students to do O levels from Cambridge. That was my year.
That's interesting because we're now doing CXEs.
We're now doing CXEs.
And what was it before O levels?
It was the Cambridge exam.
Oh,
remember?
Okay.
Yes, the Cambridge, and you did that, and you got a grade 1 or a grade 2 or whatever.
Right.
Yes. My older sister, did the Cambridge exam. And we were the guinea pigs, so we had 6 months to prepare for the GCE, and we didn't offer as many subjects as students offer now for CXE.
I remember that.
I'm amazed because I sit on the CXE Sub-Second Council, and I'm amazed at students coming through with 12 and 13 subjects.
Yes.
And
there was a time 6 subjects
with
was a great
1
feat.
and 2.
Yeah.
Yes, we came in with 6
Yes.
really at that time as guinea pigs, and we, it was a little frightening. We didn't like the idea of being guinea pigs and moving from Cambridge to O levels. But it wasn't that formidable,
So you more or less progressed in this field of English literature.
Yes, well, English, and then I got the first degree, did the DipEd at Mona again, a DipEd in the teaching of English to prepare myself because I wanted to teach. So I would go back home to St. Lucia to teach, which is what I did. And I did that and used to teach at the extramural department as well, after hours classes for people and so on. I used to teach English language and so on, taught English to, there were some Spanish people who couldn't speak English, so I taught them as well. And that was fun, but I didn't know it was a sort of precursor to a lot of what I would be thinking about and doing when I moved on to a higher study.
You mentioned just now that you wanted to teach.
Yes.
You think that was your calling?
Well, I didn't.
From very early?
No, I didn't think so. I wanted to be a doctor, believe it or not.
Yeah.
I thought I would want to be a doctor. Why? Because when I was very small, I remember growing up, my father at Christmas got this book called Dr. Dan that he gave me. And in this, it was sort of a book with a package of little gadgets, a little stethoscope and a thermometer and so on. And I used to go around the house taking my mother's temperature and trying to take my father's blood pressure and listening to their heartbeat, child's thing. And I thought, oh, I'm going to be a doctor. But guess what? When we came through at the convent, which I attended at that time, St. Joseph's, they had not got a solid science program. And some student, it's the year after I moved from third form that they started to introduce sciences full-time in their curriculum. So my class group missed doing the basics in chemistry and physics.
Right.
And so I decided, well, I'll just do what we had to do, geography, biology, and all of that. And so we did these basic subjects growing up. When I say basic, they're not, but I mean that core of subjects. And I went off to UWI, having done very well with the English. Yes. So I said, okay, that's what I'm good at, so I'll do it. When I went, I hadn't even thought that there was a pre-med program that I could have applied for, and maybe at the time, because UWI was growing and so on, lots of people came into medicine, even if to do the pre-med as a preparation to go into the program.
Right.
So that was a possibility, and I suppose if I had been good enough and could have picked up the science then, I might have had that career. But it never occurred to me. It's only after I was talking to friends and they said, why didn't you do pre-med? And I said, oh, I didn't know about pre-med.
Do you look back with any regrets? Or are you quite happy in the place you are now?
I am very, very happy where I am. I have enjoyed doing what I have done. Teaching English, doing research in English and the vernaculars of the Caribbean. And St. Lucia in particular, because I do a lot of my research on the languages of St. Lucia, and from the applied point of view, to try and find out how students who are French Creole speakers, native speakers of French Creole, what sorts of issues and problems they have in learning English. Because English is the subject that is valued. It is the one that is validated within the school system.
Yes.
And this is the language of success for students. So a student has to master it to access the content of all the subjects that they're doing, except of course for French and for Spanish and the foreign languages. Everything else, the content is in English. And so I wondered, because I was privy to data from the what you call it, the minimum standards test that had introduced, a common entrance, and I noticed how many students were failing in English and couldn't get on to CXC. And then I was a chief in CXC, the first chief. And when we looked at the results, and I looked at the percentage of students across the Caribbean, but I always focused on St. Lucia to see what the number of students not getting the grades 1, 2, and 3. And I decided I wanted to study why that was so. Mm. And so a lot of my research is on that, and really trying to promote bilingualism, because all the research shows, and it's not just for Creoles, okay, that if the child develops a solid cognition with schoolwork in the first language, if that first language is nurtured, even if it's French, if it's Creole, French Creole, that the child is taught properly and the child is in a bilingual situation in a school setting, the literacy skills jump over quite naturally to the second language once it's taught properly, and then you have a bilingual, and the cognitive flexibility is much stronger than a person who is a monolingual. Yes. So it speaks well for it's a very positive statement to make about that we can use in the education system to help develop the curriculum programs for our students.
Let's talk a bit about something you mentioned. You're saying about the languages of St. Lucia. I mean, I just thought St. Lucia was either English or French Creole. Mm-hmm. Now, it's interesting that you say that, because bring it to the context of, say, St. Vincent, that does not have an official second language, right? I mean, St. Lucia, there's French Creole, there's English.
And there's also the English vernacular. I'll tell you about that after.
What are you referring to when you say the English vernacular? Because that's probably the point I want to get to.
Yes. Yeah. You know, there was a stage in our history where we had a higher percentage of people speaking French Creole than English. But that has
our history meaning St. Lucia?
Yes, okay. St. Lucia. Yeah. That has changed over time, because when the English took over control, in colonial days of St. Lucia, they insisted on an education system that would use English. So the French had still established a culture, and the language was widely used. And of course, through contact between the French and our African ancestors who came to the country, you had the development of what might have been a pidgin, and that developed into a Creole, which is the French Creole, in that it has a French lexicon, but the syntax, the morphosyntax has a sort of African structure, whatever the languages were, with some French. Right. So the French Creole became, the language that people used a lot. As time went on, and you have that continued contact between French and English and the French Creole, more people began to speak French Creole and English, although there was also a stigma against French Creole. So you find a whole sector of St. Lucian families who would say, we don't speak Creole. That's because our parents don't allow us to speak it, because it's the language of slaves, and all of this denigration of the Creole, which is really ridiculous. But anyway, we had that. But children speaking French Creole only coming into school to learn English, and without the kinds of instruction of English, say, as a second language, or the kind of immersion that a lot of some good teachers would have had, an immersion program that really helped them to learn the English. Those fortunate in that as well would become bilingual, but not with the Creole being nurtured at all, you see? Yeah. So out of that contact now of French Creole and English in the classroom, this is what we have found out: the emergence of another language.
Which is what you call the English
vernacular. Which is what I'm
vernacular.
calling the St. Lucian English vernacular.
Yes.
Some people call it vessel vernacular English of St. Lucia. I like to use St. Lucian English vernacular, but it's the same thing we talk about. It has, it's like a sort of a calqued version of French Creole. So you get the structure of the French Creole, but with English words in it. And so the English version is very much and similar in many ways to some of the English dialect varieties you get in St. Vincent and elsewhere.
I want to lighten that too, and I'm conscious that we're at the end of this section, but just as an introduction to the next section, I want to lighten that to what obtains in St. Vincent without the French Creole, but with certainly the English vernacular equivalent of what you're talking about in St. Lucia. And I want to look at how that impedes or hinders the natural uptake of English as a first language, and how that may have prevented or made it difficult for a lot of people to progress along academic lines because of this barrier of perfect English. So when we come back, it sounds like a mouthful, but when we come back, we'll pick that up.
No, it's a very good thing to explore.
Good, we'll pick that up. Okay. You're looking at Unrendered. My guest is Professor Hazel Simmonds McDonald. More with the professor when we come back.